The beeping of the heart monitor wasn't what woke me. It was the ringing of my phone, slicing through the sterile quiet like a scalpel. By the time I reached it, I already knew something in my life was about to break. I was only 3 days out from the heart attack. My chest still felt like someone had shoved a brick into it and taped it shut. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee from the nurse's station down the hall. My hospital bed faced a high, narrow window looking out over downtown Denver. The January sky was the color of wet concrete. I'd spent the morning drifting in and out of shallow sleep, interrupted by the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum and the hiss of IV pumps. I wasn't ready for company, let alone drama. But the phone kept ringing. I fumbled for it with my left hand, the one not tethered to a plastic line. The movement pulled at the IV, sending a cold trickle into my vein. Kara's name lit the screen. "Kara," I said, voice thick from pain meds. "It's almost midnight. What's going on?" There was no warmth in her reply, just a flat precision, like she was reading from a prepared statement. "Dad, I'm getting married. Tomorrow." My pulse jumped, and the monitor tattled on me with a quickened rhythm. "Tomorrow? Kara, you never even told me." "I don't need your permission. I'm 30. I can make my own decisions." Her tone wasn't angry. That would have been easier. Anger has heat. This was cold. The kind of cold you get when someone else is holding the thermostat. "Who's the lucky guy?" I asked, though the knot forming in my stomach told me I already knew. "Ethan Blake. We've been together 8 months. The condo's sold, and the car. We're using the money for the wedding and the honeymoon." I pressed my palm to my forehead, feeling the dull ache of disbelief. The condo wasn't just real estate. It was the safety net I'd built for her after her mother died. The car had been my way of saying, "I believe in you," when she graduated from the University of Colorado. "Kara," I tried to keep my voice steady. "You can't?" "I can. And I did. Ethan says, I've let you control me too long. This is my chance to be independent." There it was again. "Ethan says," the ventriloquist's lips moving behind the curtain. She wasn't the same daughter who'd sat with me in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, studying for finals, while I proofed corporate contracts. She wasn't the 15-year-old who'd wrapped her arms around my waist at her mother's funeral and whispered, "We'll figure it out, Dad." Now she was someone else's echo. "Kara, please. There's nothing to talk about. And Dad, I'm sorry about your heart, but I can't let guilt decide my life anymore." I swallowed. "Okay," I said finally. My voice surprised me. It was calmer than I felt. "But you forgot something." A pause. What's that supposed to mean? 30 years in corporate law had taught me never to show all my cards. "You'll find out. Congratulations, sweetheart." I hung up before she could answer. The monitor slowed back to its normal pace, but something inside me had already shifted. I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a father with an enemy. My eyes drifted to the photo on the bedside table. Kara, at 25, her MBA cap crooked from laughing too hard, Claire's ghost smiling through her eyes. I remembered the promise I'd made to my wife as she lay in hospice. Denver's winter light pouring through the blinds. "Promise me you'll take care of her," she'd said, her voice paper thin. "I promise," I told her. "She'll never go without." I'd kept that promise for 15 years. Until now. The next morning, a nurse wheeled me down to the hospital entrance with a paper bag of prescriptions on my lap. She reminded me to rest, avoid stress, keep my blood pressure steady. I nodded like a good patient, knowing full well I'd ignore half of it before the day was out. The air outside bit my cheeks. Snow crunched under the tires of the taxi that took me home. My old Victorian in Capitol Hill looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I'd spent 4 days in a room where the walls never moved. I carried my hospital bag straight past the kitchen and into my home office. The Barrett family trust binder was exactly where I'd left it, in the fireproof cabinet, next to Claire's will. I flipped to the page I knew by heart. The condo wasn't Kara's to sell. She was beneficiary, not owner. I was trustee. Legally, she couldn't sign it away without my consent, which meant Ethan had convinced her to commit a fraud she didn't even understand. I'd seen this before, not with my daughter, but with clients, men who spotted a vulnerability and built their whole life around exploiting it. I pulled my Rolodex closer. Some people collect art. I collect favors. The first number I dialed answered on the second ring. "Porter Investigations," said a voice I'd trusted for 2 decades. "Marcus, it's Dan Barrett. I need a full workup on someone. Ethan Blake, Denver resident, drives a black Audi Q7. License." I read it from a photo Kara had posted. "And Marcus, don't leave a single stone unturned." He grunted. "Give me 48 hours for a quick profile, a week for the deep dive. I'll pay whatever it takes. This one's personal." 2 days later, I sat at my desk with my 3rd cup of coffee when the phone rang. "You're not gonna like this," Marcus said. "No verified work history for the last 5 years. Claims he's a strategic consultant, but there's no registered business, no clients. Lives in an overpriced high-rise downtown. 2 months behind on rent. Car payments overdue. And Dan? There's a pattern." I leaned back. "Go on." 3 women in 6 years. All financially secure when they met him. All broke when they left. 2 filed restraining orders, dropped them. 1 moved states. Looks like he bails when the money's gone. It was a pattern, all right. A predator's blueprint. I decided to see Kara in person before making my next move. Somewhere public. Neutral ground. Harder for her to walk away. I picked a coffee shop in Lodo, exposed brick and low lighting. I got there early, picked a corner table where I could see both the door and the street. Years of depositions had taught me, position yourself where you can watch the exits. Kara arrived 10 minutes late. She looked polished. Expensive boots, new designer bag, a diamond on her finger that hadn't been there last month. "Dad," she said flatly, sitting across from me, "if this is about Ethan, save it. I'm not here for a lecture." "This is about the condo," I said, sliding a document toward her. She barely glanced. "I told you. It's sold." "No, you tried to sell it. Without legal authority." I tapped the paragraph in the trust agreement. "Beneficiary doesn't mean owner, Kara. Ethan should know that." Her lips pressed into a line. "He says you set this up to control me." "He says a lot of things," I replied. "Has he shown you his tax returns? His business license? Anything proving income? That's none of your business." It became my business the second he made you a target. I gathered the papers, slid them back into my folder. "Tell Ethan the condo's not his payday, then watch what happens next." She stood, eyes flashing. "I'm not playing your games, Dad." "I know," I said. "You're playing his." I watched her walk out into the thin Denver sunlight. For the first time in years, I felt the pulse of an old instinct I hadn't used since retiring from law. The readiness for a fight. The real question was whether I could win it before Ethan made his next move. If you're still here with me, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments. Give this story a like if it's pulling you in, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the walls start closing in on Ethan. Some people think a predator announces himself with teeth. In my experience, they show up with a smile and a handshake. That's how I met Ethan Blake. It was last August. Kara had invited me to dinner at her favorite place, the Copper Finch, a mid-range bistro tucked into a converted warehouse near Union Station. I'd been there plenty of times with her. Birthdays, promotions, graduations. Every milestone had a Copper Finch meal attached to it. That night, though, she wasn't alone. "Dad, this is Ethan," she said as I approached the table. He stood, smiling like a man who's just been handed the keys to a safe he hasn't even cracked yet. Tall, well-dressed, hair too perfectly in place to be an accident. His handshake was firm, just a fraction too long. The kind that says, "I'm in control here," without words. "Daniel Barrett," I said. "I've heard a lot about you," Ethan replied, his voice smooth enough to sell whiskey. "You raised an incredible daughter." Flattery. Easy to spot, easier to ignore. We ordered. He suggested a bottle of wine that cost more than some car payments. When the bill came, he made a half-hearted reach for his wallet, clearly relieved when I covered it. His Rolex caught the candlelight as he folded his hands, and something in my gut started whispering. "So, Ethan," I said casually, "what do you do?" "I help people maximize opportunities," he said, leaning back like the question was an underhand pitch. "Opportunities," I repeated. "That's broad." "It's strategic consulting. I prefer to keep my client list private." Kara jumped in before I could press. "He's being modest. He's helped a lot of people turn their finances around." I'd seen this kind of thing before, answers that sounded confident but said nothing. The less detail, the more careful you had to be. That night, after I got home, I couldn't shake it. I'd spent 30 years reading witnesses in depositions, catching micro-reactions, spotting lies before they left the mouth. Ethan had the same calculated ease I'd seen in men who sold non-existent investment portfolios and in executives who swore their books were clean right up until the SEC kicked their doors in. Still, Kara seemed happy, and I didn't want to be the paranoid dad who drove her away. So I stayed quiet, for a while. But the silences between us grew longer. The Sunday dinners we used to have turned into coffee, if she had time. Her texts got shorter, calls rarer. When I did see her, Ethan was usually there, always sitting close enough to keep her in his gravity. 2 months later, she asked me to co-sign on a small business loan for Ethan's consulting company. Said it was just to leverage better rates. I told her I don't sign for anything without seeing the full financials. She looked at me like I'd kicked her dog. That's when I knew he was already inside the walls. When Marcus's first report came in after part 1, it wasn't just bad. It was a blueprint for exactly what I feared. 3 women. Same timeline every time. Meet, romance, cohabitate, joint finances, opportunity investment, then gone. One of them had sold her lake house to help him secure a contract. The contract never materialized. I stared at the file for an hour before I picked up the phone and called Richard Maxwell, my old law partner. If anyone could help me navigate this without stepping into a legal trap, it was Richard. "Danny, I thought you retired so you could stop calling me with trouble," he said when he picked up. "I did. This is personal." I laid out the basics. Ethan, the trust, the attempted condo sale, the pattern of victims. He whistled low. "That's a con man's resume. What's your play?" "I need a case tight enough to make it stick if he challenges me in court. And I need to do it without losing Kara entirely." "Kato, that second part," Richard said, "is the hard one." 3 nights later, Kara called. "I just want you to stop digging into Ethan," she said. "Kara, if I told you I had documented proof that Ethan did to other women exactly what he's doing to you, would you want to see it?" Silence. Ethan says you'll do anything to control me. He says you'll fabricate things to get your way. The precision of the language told me it was rehearsed. Not her words. His. Kara, Ethan's a professional at this. He's counting on you to defend him against anyone who threatens his plan. She exhaled sharply. Good night, Dad. Click. I've seen a lot of fights in my life. Boardroom brawls, courtroom wars, but nothing feels as helpless as watching your own child defend the person trying to hollow her out. So I shifted my approach. Less direct, more pressure on his end. I had Marcus pull property records, vehicle registrations, credit reports. I wanted Ethan's life on paper. Every liability, every debt, every missed payment. The man was drowning financially. Without the condo sale, he was out of options. That meant he'd make a mistake soon. It came the following week, in the form of a letter. Heavy cream-colored stationery with the logo of Blake & Associates Legal Group embossed at the top. I'd never heard of them. Inside was a cease and desist claiming I was harassing my daughter and her fiancé, making false and defamatory claims, and illegally interfering with lawful property transactions. The grammar alone told me it wasn't drafted by anyone worth their hourly rate. I called Richard. Please tell me you're looking at this letter. I am, he said, chuckling. This guy's attorney either got his degree out of a cereal box or isn't a real attorney. What's your read? Total bluff. They're hoping you'll back down without a fight. I smiled for the first time that week. Then let's make it a fight they regret starting. That night, I drafted my response. Attached copies of the trust documents, notarized, proof of purchase, title insurance. A paragraph politely warning that any further frivolous legal action would result in a comprehensive investigation into Ethan's finances, personal history, and potential criminal behavior. I mailed it certified, return receipt requested. By morning, I had a call from Marcus. He's spooked. Your letter rattled him. He's been making cash withdrawals, moving funds between accounts, and, this is big, he's talking to a realtor in Vegas about a short-term rental. That meant only one thing. He was preparing an exit. Before I made my next move, I needed more. Not just paper evidence, voices. Through Marcus's network, I tracked down 2 of Ethan's previous victims. The first refused to talk. The second, Amanda Price, called me back within hours. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to take him down, she said. Whatever you need, I'll help. Her story was exactly what I feared. Whirlwind romance, 2 perfect promises, joint accounts, then a time-sensitive opportunity that required her to liquidate assets. When she hesitated, he turned it into a loyalty test. She passed. He vanished 6 weeks later with $180,000. You think your daughter's different? Amanda told me. I did too. Her words stuck with me long after we hung up. That's where I was when my phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m. Kara again. I don't know what you've been telling people, she said, but Ethan's furious, and you need to stop. I almost told her about Amanda right then. Almost. But some part of me knew she needed to see it for herself. So instead, I said, I will, Kara. Soon. And for the first time since this started, I meant it. Not because I was quitting, but because the trap was almost set. Predators don't like daylight. They prefer the shadow between doubt and proof, where everything they say can be framed as just your interpretation. My plan for Ethan Blake was simple. Drag him into the daylight. Marcus delivered the missing piece on a Tuesday morning. He'd found the third woman. Not just a name, he had a phone number, a verified address, and a willingness to talk. Her name was Jennifer Cross, 42, real estate broker in Fort Collins. When Marcus mentioned my daughter, she didn't hesitate. "I'll drive down," she said. "Just tell me when and where." I picked the same coffee shop in Lodo where I'd met Kara before. It had the right balance of public visibility and conversational privacy. Kara didn't know Jennifer was coming. If she had, she wouldn't have shown up. The sky that Thursday was a crisp blue, the kind of winter morning Denver sells in postcards. I got there 20 minutes early and took the same corner seat. The leather folder in front of me felt heavier than it was. Inside, Marcus's compiled reports, Amanda Price's signed statement, and now Jennifer's. Kara arrived right on time. She was wearing a cream-colored coat I'd never seen before, hairstyled like she'd just come from a salon. There was a hardness to her posture, like she'd come ready for a fight. "Dad," she said, sliding into the chair, "if this is another ambush..." The bell over the door jingled. Jennifer walked in, scanning the room until our eyes met. She approached without hesitation, sliding into the seat beside me. Kara's eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" "I'm Jennifer Cross," she said evenly, "and I was engaged to Ethan Blake 2 years ago." Kara froze, then let out a short, dismissive laugh. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," Jennifer said. She reached into her own folder and pulled out a marriage license application. Ethan's name right there in black ink. This is what he filed when we were together. We didn't make it to the wedding because by then I'd realized he was draining my accounts. "That's not possible," Kara said, but her voice lacked the sharpness I'd expected. "Ethan told me I was his first serious relationship since college." Jennifer didn't flinch. "That's what he told me too. And Amanda Price. Same words, same promises, same timing, 8 to 10 months in. There's always a business opportunity or some urgent investment. He gets access to your money, drains it, and disappears." Kara shook her head. "You're just here because you're bitter. You're making this up." Jennifer leaned forward. "If I were making it up, how would I know about the downtown condo in your name? The one you think you sold?" Kara blinked. "How do you—" "Because he bragged about finding someone with assets, but no real understanding of property law. Same way he talked about me when he thought I wasn't listening. He likes women who are smart enough to make money, but too trusting to guard it." I watched Kara's face shift, confusion giving way to something like recognition. She knew the tone Jennifer was using. She'd heard it before, from him. Jennifer pulled out her final piece, a printed copy of an email Ethan had sent her, promising they'd start over somewhere warm, just the two of us, free from everyone who tried to tear us apart. Kara read it, slowly. Her eyes scanned the sentences, her lips pressing tighter with each line. "That's almost word for word what he texted me last week," she said finally. Silence. The coffee shop noise faded into the background hum of my pulse. Kara stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. "I need air," she muttered. We followed her outside. The sunlight was harsh, bouncing off the snowbanks lining the sidewalk. "Kara," I said gently, "this isn't about me controlling you. It's about you seeing the pattern before you lose more than just money." She looked at me, eyes wet but defiant. "I don't know what to believe right now, but I can't just walk away without talking to him." Jennifer's voice was calm but firm. "You don't owe him an explanation. You owe yourself safety." Kara didn't answer. She pulled out her phone and started walking toward her car. That night, Marcus called. "He knows," he said. "Ethan knows she met with Jennifer. He's been calling her nonstop since this afternoon. If she picks up, he's going to do everything he can to rewrite what she heard." "Can you keep eyes on her place?" I asked. "I already am. And Dan, he's not happy. Saw him pacing in the garage, on the phone, real agitated. That didn't surprise me. Predators don't get angrier when you accuse them. They get angrier when you prove it. The next morning, Kara texted me. He says Jennifer's lying. Says you paid her to make it up. I don't know what to think. I typed, erased, and retyped my reply 3 times before sending. You don't have to believe me or Jennifer. Just look at his actions over the next few days. Then decide. It took less than 48 hours for Ethan to make his move. Marcus caught it on camera. Ethan loading a black duffel into the back of his Audi at 6:14 a.m., his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. He drove straight to a storage unit on the edge of town, went inside for 20 minutes, came out with another duffel. Cash withdrawals from his account started hitting an hour later. This wasn't just damage control. This was the beginning of a disappearance. I called Richard. It's happening. He's preparing to vanish. If Kara's still tied to him when he goes, she's going to lose everything. Richard's voice was grim. Then you'd better pull the pin now. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, documents spread out like the opening statement to a case I'd been building for months. In truth, it had been less than 3 weeks. But when your child's life is at stake, time stretches. By dawn, the plan was set. I'd get Kara to a neutral location. She'd see and hear enough to tip the scale. And if she still chose him after that, at least I'd know I'd done everything I could. When I closed my eyes for a moment, I remembered Claire's voice. "Protect her, Danny," she'd whispered all those years ago. I opened my eyes. "I'm trying," I told the empty room. There's a point in every chess game where you stop trading pawns and start moving in for the kill. By Friday morning, I knew we were there. Marcus's surveillance had given me the clearest picture yet. Ethan wasn't just talking about leaving, he was engineering an exit. He'd rented a storage unit under an alias. He'd withdrawn just under the bank's reporting threshold 3 days in a row. He'd been in touch with a realtor in Las Vegas, the same city where Amanda Price told me he'd disappeared with her money. If Kara was still tethered to him when he left, she'd wake up broke and hollowed out, wondering how a man who said "I love you" over morning coffee could vanish before dinner. I called Richard first. "He's about to run," I said. Richard didn't hesitate. "Then you need to stop him before he crosses state lines. Once he's gone, your leverage drops to near zero." "I can't get Kara to consent to anything," I said. "She's still in the fog." "Then go around her," Richard replied. "We do this by the book, with evidence strong enough to bring in law enforcement without her cooperation. You give them a reason to act that doesn't hinge on her permission." The next 48 hours blurred into a war room operation. My dining table vanished under layers of documents. Marcus's photos, bank records, sworn statements from Amanda and Jennifer, property records from every address Ethan had used in the last decade. Marcus brought the hardware, a laptop running facial recognition software, a portable scanner, an evidence log spreadsheet color-coded to match our timeline of events. "Here's the kicker," Marcus said, pulling up a grainy security cam still. 3 weeks ago, he walked into a check-cashing place in Aurora with a cashier's check made out to a name that isn't his. Walked out with 12 grand in cash. "Forgery?" I asked. "Could be. Or it's a shell company payout. Either way, not clean." We sent everything to Richard's office for legal review. By Sunday night, he called back. "This is enough for a preliminary fraud complaint," he said. "If the DA's willing, we can get a warrant to detain him for questioning before he leaves Colorado." "Do it," I said. Monday morning, Marcus spotted Ethan's Audi in the visitor lot outside Kara's building. He was there for over 2 hours. Kara hadn't answered my calls all weekend, so the thought of them together that long churned in my stomach. "He's working her hard," Marcus said over the phone. "Body language says he's in damage control mode. Lots of hand gestures, leaning in close, trying to keep her from pulling away." "What's her body language?" I asked. "Guarded, arms crossed, but she's still talking to him." Guarded was better than leaning in, but not by much. By noon, Richard had the green light. The DA was in. We had enough probable cause to get a warrant for financial fraud, with the option to expand if new evidence surfaced during questioning. The plan was simple. Keep eyes on Ethan. Wait for him to make a move toward the state line and intercept. But simple doesn't mean easy. That night, I sat in my office staring at the framed photo of Claire again. "You'd hate this," I told her quietly. "The secrecy, the ambush, the feeling like I'm going behind Kara's back." In the stillness, I imagined her answer. "You'd hate the alternative more." Tuesday morning, Marcus called at 7:12 a.m. "He's moving," he said. "Loaded 2 suitcases into the Audi. Got the duffel from the storage unit. Heading south on I-25. Vegas? Could be. He's got enough gas to make it halfway." I was already grabbing my coat. "Tell the DA's team he's in motion." The intercept point was a rest stop outside Pueblo, a place where truckers outnumbered tourists 2-1. Marcus and I got there first. His unmarked SUV sat nose out in the far lot, giving us a clear view of the highway. At 9:47 a.m., the black Audi rolled in. Ethan parked near the vending machines, stepped out wearing sunglasses and a casual jacket over what looked like a tailored shirt. Even in flight, he dressed like he had an image to maintain. 2 unmarked police cars slid in quietly behind him. The officers moved fast, polite but firm. Ethan's head swiveled, looking for an escape that didn't exist. They cuffed him beside the Audi. One officer read the warrant. Another began an on-site search of the vehicle. Marcus was already snapping photos of every bag they pulled out. In the second duffel, $14,200 in cash, a burner phone, and a leather folio with Kara's name on the front. Inside, printouts of her bank statements, a copy of the trust document for the condo, and a handwritten list titled Assets, Liquid vs. Fixed. I'd seen those lists before, in other people's cases. They were shopping lists for thieves. Ethan spotted me standing by Marcus's SUV. "Even in cuffs," he smirked. "You think this stops me?" he said, his voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "It stops you today," I replied, "and that's enough." Kara called that night. Her voice was tight. "I heard what you did," she said. "I stopped him from leaving the state with your financial records and cash." She was quiet for a long moment. "He says you planted it, that it's all part of your obsession with controlling me." "Kara, that folder with your name on it was in his car. It had your bank accounts, the trust, even a tally of what he thought he could get from you. If that's love, I'd hate to see what he does to people he doesn't care about." "I don't know what to believe," she said again. That night, lying in bed, I realized something that should have been obvious. Catching him wasn't the same as keeping her safe. Ethan would find a way to get inside her head again if she let him. Which meant the real work was just starting. Catching Ethan was supposed to be the turning point. Instead, it felt like I'd just driven him into a different kind of fight. One where the battlefield was entirely inside my daughter's head. The day after his arrest, he posted bail. I knew he would. Men like Ethan always find a way to breathe through the cracks. His attorney was a slick Boulder litigator named Nathan Caro, the kind who could charm a jury into believing gravity was optional. The bond paperwork wasn't even cold before Ethan was walking out of the Pueblo County Jail in a pressed shirt, as if a night in custody had been just another business meeting. By Monday, he was already moving pieces. It started with a handwritten letter Kara found under her apartment door. I know because she called me, not to thank me for stopping him, but to accuse me of pushing him into desperation. He says you humiliated him in front of strangers, she said, voice trembling more with emotion than anger. Kara, he was caught with your financial records, cash, and a burner phone. That wasn't desperation. It was preparation. You don't understand, she shot back. He says he was leaving to protect me from you, that you were about to ruin us financially. I closed my eyes. Sweetheart, that's not just a lie. It's a strategic lie. He knows your biggest fear is being controlled. He's weaponizing it. Her silence was heavier than any argument. That week, mutual acquaintances started calling me. Old neighbors, a yoga instructor Kara liked, even one of her grad school friends. All of them repeating variations of the same line. Ethan says you've been harassing him, that you're using your legal background to bully him because you don't think anyone is good enough for Kara. It was working. The more voices she heard repeating his script, the more it sounded like consensus instead of manipulation. I needed to break that pattern, and I knew exactly how. Amanda Price and Jennifer Cross had both agreed to testify if the case went to trial. But court dates were months away, and by then Ethan's version of events could be cemented in Kara's mind. What I needed was something live, undeniable, a moment she couldn't reinterpret later. Marcus arranged it in a quiet conference room he sometimes used for depositions. Neutral space. No personal history to color the moment. Kara agreed to meet me there on the pretense of discussing the trust. But she froze when she saw Amanda and Jennifer waiting. "What is this?" she asked, stepping back toward the door. "This," I said gently, "is your chance to hear the truth without me as the filter. I'm not talking. They are." Amanda went first. She told her story plainly, without drama. How she'd met Ethan at a charity gala, how he'd been charming and attentive, how within 6 months they were living together, how the investment opportunity had come up, how she'd sold her lake house to fund it, how he vanished with the proceeds. Jennifer picked up where Amanda left off, describing her own first months with Ethan, down to the exact phrases he'd used to describe their future. Kara sat rigid, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a spot on the table. But I could see the shift. Tiny muscle movements in her jaw, a subtle flicker in her eyes when she recognized a line that had once felt like it belonged only to her. "And here's the thing," Jennifer said, leaning forward. "He didn't just take money. He took time, confidence, trust. The kind of things you can't insure against. You start thinking you're the problem, that you're unlovable, that you deserved it." Amanda nodded. "You start defending him to the people trying to help you." Kara's breath hitched. She didn't look at me, but she didn't leave either. When the meeting ended, she walked out without a word. I let her go. You can't force someone to accept a truth they're not ready to hold. Marcus stayed behind to help me pack up the documents. "She's thinking," he said. "That's the first crack." 2 days later, the next phase of Ethan's counterattack arrived. It was an email, CC'd to Kara and half a dozen people in her circle, accusing me of systematically attempting to destroy a lawful relationship through intimidation, fabrication, and abuse of legal influence. Attached was a 2-page PDF titled Evidence of Harassment that was, in reality, just a collection of out-of-context text messages between Kara and me, stripped of any reference to Ethan's actions. It wasn't meant for court. It was meant for public opinion. Our small community of family friends, mutual contacts, and anyone Kara might lean on. Richard called me within an hour. He's running a PR defense, not for the jury, for your daughter. Then I guess it's time we go public too, I said. We started small. A carefully worded email to the same recipients, attaching the arrest record, the warrant, and redacted versions of Amanda's and Jennifer's sworn statements. No commentary, just facts. By the next morning, 2 of Kara's friends had reached out privately to say they had questions for Ethan. It wasn't a tidal wave, but it was movement. Ethan's response was to escalate. Marcus caught him parked across from Kara's building late one night, lights off, phone pressed to his ear. 10 minutes later, Kara called me, her voice shaky. He says he can explain everything if I just meet him in person. That if I don't, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. My stomach nodded. Kara, that's not an explanation. That's a threat wrapped in romance. I know, she whispered, but part of me still wants to hear him out. That's how he gets back in, I said. Through the part of you that still believes you were special to him. Silence. Then, I'll think about it. The next morning, I moved to the offensive. I had Marcus deliver copies of the evidence packet directly to Ethan's bail officer. Something Kara wouldn't be expecting. If Ethan so much as hinted at violating his bail terms by contacting Kara in person, we'd have leverage to revoke his release. I also reached out to a journalist I knew from my corporate law days, someone who'd covered high-profile fraud cases with integrity. I wasn't ready to hand her the full story, but I gave her enough to start background research on Ethan. Predators thrive in silence. My job was to make sure he had none. That Friday, Kara texted me. I told him I can't see him. He's not taking it well. I stared at the screen for a long moment. That wasn't victory, but it was ground gained. And in a battle like this, ground is everything. The thing about a predator is, once you drag him into the light, you better be ready for the thrashing. And by the second week after his arrest, Ethan Blake was thrashing. He'd spent the first few days out on bail doing damage control, private meetings with Kara, late-night calls to mutual contacts, the letter under her door, but once she refused to meet him in person again, his tactics shifted. Less charm, more fire. Marcus's surveillance caught him outside her apartment building 3 nights in a row. He never approached the door. He wasn't stupid enough to give us an easy bail violation, but he was always there, sitting in the Audi, watching. Keeps making calls from the car, Marcus told me over the phone. Same pattern. Short calls, then texting like mad. I'd bet my license he's lining up character witnesses to paint him as the victim. I knew exactly how that game was played. I'd seen corporate defendants stack the deck with credible voices, ready to testify about what a great guy the accused was. It didn't erase evidence. It muddied the waters. That's when I decided to go public. I called Melissa Sharp, an investigative journalist I'd known for years. She'd written clean, fact-checked exposés on fraud and embezzlement cases I'd worked. The kind of reporter who didn't sensationalize. She just followed the paper trail until the truth bled out. I gave her the broad strokes. Multiple victims, similar patterns, financial records, sworn statements, the arrest. I didn't give her Kara's name. At least, not yet. Melissa listened without interrupting. If you give me your evidence file, I can have this live within a week, she said finally. You understand what that means, right? I do. It'll scorch the earth. No one will want to be seen with him, but it'll also paint a target on you and your daughter. He'll know exactly where it came from. I glanced at the Barrett Family Trust binder on my desk. Good. I want him to know. 3 days later, the Denver Gazette ran a front-page story. Pattern of fraud. Local man faces allegations from multiple women. The subheader listed Amanda Price and Jennifer Cross by name, with quotes from each. The story outlined Ethan's alleged MO: romance, financial entanglement, sudden disappearance, citing police records, property sales, and bank transfers. It didn't take long for it to spread. By noon, it was on half a dozen local news sites. By evening, it had hit Reddit. Marcus texted me a screenshot of Ethan's Facebook page. Dozens of angry comments from people who'd read the article, warning others to steer clear. Kara called that night. "Why did you do this?" she demanded. "Because he's been running this playbook for years, and silence is his oxygen. This cuts off his air supply. You humiliated him, in public." "Kara, this isn't about humiliation. It's about making sure the next woman sees his name and thinks twice before letting him in." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. This isn't just going to destroy him. It's going to follow me. People are going to know I was with him." "That's why I kept your name out of it," I said. "You're not the story. He is." She hung up without another word. The fallout was immediate. Melissa emailed me 2 days later. "You've got more victims coming out of the woodwork. 2 in Colorado Springs, 1 in Phoenix, all with the same timeline." The Phoenix woman, Sarah Leighton, had an actual police report from 2016. Ethan had drained a joint account, taken her Jeep, and left her stranded. She'd never pursued charges because the Jeep was eventually found abandoned, and the DA back then didn't think they could make the fraud stick. We added her sworn statement to the growing file. Ethan, of course, counterpunched. A week after the article hit, Melissa forwarded me a cease and desist letter she'd received from Nathan Caro, threatening a defamation suit. It was a transparent scare tactic. Everything Melissa published was backed by public record. But it told me one thing. We'd gotten under Ethan's skin. Marcus confirmed it. "He's pacing in that car more than he's sitting," he reported. And today, he had a visitor. Older guy, expensive suit, briefcase. Spent 40 minutes in the passenger seat. My guess, a fixer. Someone who cleans up messes that lawyers can't. I'd dealt with fixers before. They didn't come cheap, and they didn't work for people who still thought they were winning. Then the threats started. It began as anonymous texts to my office line. "You don't know what you've started." Then to my personal phone. "Accidents happen. Stay in your lane." Marcus traced the numbers. Burner phones, purchased in cash. He couldn't prove they were from Ethan, but he didn't have to. I knew the rhythm of his intimidation as well as I knew the cadence of my own daughter's laugh. I forwarded every message to Richard, who in turn sent them to the DA. If Ethan thought fear would make me slow down, he'd misread his mark. Still, I couldn't ignore the other war, the one inside Kara's head. She'd been quieter since the article. Less defensive, but also less communicative. I suspected she was isolating, trying to process the disconnect between the Ethan she thought she knew and the man the world was now tearing apart. So I gave her space, but not too much. Every couple of days, I'd send her something small, an article about fraud recovery, a podcast episode about coercive control, even just a text saying I loved her. Nothing about Ethan, nothing about the case, just proof that my role in her life wasn't conditional on her agreeing with me. It was a Thursday when she finally broke the silence. "Can we meet?" I suggested a diner halfway between our places. She arrived in jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, hair pulled back in a loose knot. She looked tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "I read the article," she said, sliding into the booth. Then I read it again. And then I read the comments. I waited. Some of them were hard, but a lot of them were people thanking those women for speaking up, saying they'd been through similar things. She picked at the edge of a napkin. It made me wonder if maybe I'm not seeing him clearly. That's all I've wanted, I said quietly. For you to wonder. She didn't smile, but she didn't leave either. When we parted, I didn't ask her if she was done with him. I didn't need the answer yet. The shift in her eyes told me we were finally pulling in the same direction, even if only by inches. But inches, in this kind of war, can be the difference between losing and surviving. The Gazette article was supposed to bury Ethan Blake, and for a while, it looked like it had. The phone calls slowed. The sightings outside Kara's building stopped. Even Marcus reported that the Audi had been parked for days, collecting a light crust of pollen and dust. But predators don't just curl up and die when the hunt turns, they adapt. I should have known he'd find a way to use the spotlight for himself. It started with a segment on a late-night AM radio show called Rocky Mountain Truth, the kind of program that specialized in giving voice to the voiceless, but often ended up amplifying the wrong voices. The host introduced Ethan as a local entrepreneur under siege by a vindictive ex and her overreaching father. I was sitting in my office at home when Marcus texted me the link. Ethan's voice came through smooth, measured, and just cracked enough to suggest emotional strain. I loved her, he said. Still do. But her father never approved of me. From the beginning, he dug into my past, twisted facts, paid people to say things that aren't true. It's not just about ruining me. It's about controlling her. I'm fighting for my life here. He didn't name Kara, but the implication was a sledgehammer. And in certain circles, it worked. The next morning, my email inbox had half a dozen messages from people I didn't know, telling me I was a tyrant and a disgrace to fatherhood. The worst part? Kara heard it too. She called me that night, voice shaking. I don't know what's true anymore, she said. When I listen to you, it makes sense. When I hear him, it makes sense too. That's because he's not arguing facts, I told her. He's arguing feelings, and feelings can be manufactured. She sighed. I wish I could believe one of you without feeling like I'm betraying the other. 3 days later, Ethan escalated. Marcus spotted him at a coffee shop 2 blocks from Kara's apartment. No Audi this time. He'd come on foot. He wasn't breaking bail conditions just by being in the neighborhood, but the proximity was deliberate. He's sending a message, Marcus said over the phone, letting her know he's still around. That night, Kara texted, he says he just wants to talk. Says if I meet him for 20 minutes, he'll leave me alone after. Kara, I replied instantly, that's a trap. 20 minutes is enough to put you right back under his thumb. Her answer came fast. I haven't said yes. I couldn't risk waiting for her to decide. I called Richard. If he tries to meet her, I want him picked up on a bail violation. We need to prove intent. That's thin, Richard warned. If she invites him, it's not a violation. We need to catch him initiating. Marcus came up with the plan. Kara would agree to a meeting in a public park, with law enforcement quietly positioned nearby. If Ethan approached her, and began discussing anything related to the case, it could be framed as witness tampering. It was risky, but so was letting him circle her unchecked. The meeting was set for a Saturday morning at City Park. Kara sat on a bench near the lake, wearing sunglasses and holding a to-go cup of coffee. Marcus and I were 50 yards back, blending into a group of weekend joggers. 2 plainclothes officers stood even farther off, pretending to fish. At 10:06 a.m., Ethan appeared. No jacket, no sunglasses, moving with that same easy confidence I'd seen the night we met. He smiled when he spotted her and closed the distance without hesitation. Marcus lifted his phone, recording. We couldn't hear the words, but we could see the body language. Ethan leaning in, Kara leaning back, his hand gesturing sharply. Twice, she shook her head. Once, she pointed at the lake like she was trying to change the subject. At 10:14, one of the officers moved in. The other followed. A few words, then they escorted Ethan away from the bench. He didn't resist, but his eyes found me over Kara's shoulder. And he smiled. That smile wasn't defiance, it was a promise. This isn't over. Kara stayed seated for another full minute after he left, just staring at the lake. When I finally approached, she didn't look at me. "You set that up, didn't you?" she said quietly. "Yes." She exhaled through her nose. "I don't know if I'm angry or relieved." "Both is fine," I said. She finally looked at me. "He said he still loves me. That you've destroyed every chance we had." I shook my head. "Kara, the only thing I've destroyed is his ability to steal from you." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. And for now, that was enough. That night, Richard called. "The DA's adding witness tampering to the charges," he said. "It's not airtight, but it strengthens the narrative. And with the new victims coming forward, we've got momentum." I hung up and stared out the window at the dark Denver skyline. Momentum was good, but momentum doesn't win the war by itself. For that, I'd need the final piece, the thing that would close the door so firmly behind Ethan Blake that even his silver tongue couldn't pry it back open. And I had a feeling I knew exactly where to find it. By the time the witness tampering charge hit the docket, I knew Ethan Blake was cornered. The problem was, cornered animals don't surrender. They bite. If I wanted to keep Kara safe, I couldn't rely on the momentum of the case alone. Ethan had spent years surviving on charm, fabrication, and selective memory. Even if the fraud charges stuck, he'd use the uncertainty to cast himself as a victim for the rest of his life. What I needed was a nail in the coffin, something he couldn't explain away, something even Kara would have to accept. The answer came from the unlikeliest source, a storage facility manager in Albuquerque. Marcus had been chasing Ethan's paper trail across state lines, combing through old addresses, expired P.O. boxes, and rental agreements. Most of it was noise, short-term leases under aliases, accounts opened and closed within weeks. But one thing stood out: a storage unit rented for nearly 5 years under the name Eric Blaine, paid in cash. When Marcus showed me the scanned rental agreement, I noticed the signature instantly. I'd seen it on the back of checks Ethan had written Kara for shared expenses months earlier. "I called the manager," Marcus said. "She says the unit's been in default for 3 months. They're scheduled to auction the contents next week." "Can we get in before the auction?" I asked. "If you're the winning bidder at the lien sale," Marcus replied, "and I already registered." The auction was held in a dusty gravel lot under a washed-out New Mexico sky. I stood with Marcus and a handful of other bidders, pretending to be just another guy looking for abandoned furniture. When the manager rolled up the corrugated door, dust puffed out like a sigh from a long-forgotten attic. At first glance, it was a mess. Cardboard boxes, a warped desk, a pair of broken golf clubs. But tucked in the back was a locked metal file cabinet. We won the unit for $580. Marcus had a locksmith open the cabinet on site. Inside were 5 accordion folders, each labeled with a woman's name I didn't recognize, until the third folder: Amanda Price, Jennifer Cross, and a third name, Sarah Layton, the Phoenix victim Melissa had found. Each folder was a grotesque archive: copies of driver's licenses, birth certificates, bank account statements, credit reports, meticulously organized, cross-referenced, annotated in Ethan's handwriting. In the back of Amanda's file, a single sheet of yellow legal pad listed her liquid assets, down to the dollar. My stomach turned. This wasn't romance. It was reconnaissance. He'd been mapping his victims before the first date. And there, in the back of the cabinet, was a folder with Kara's name. Opening it was like watching a slow-motion car crash you can't stop. Her condo trust agreement, stolen from my files. Photocopies of her car title, health insurance card, and passport. Printouts of her social media posts going back years. A page of notes titled Pressure Points, listing things like fear of abandonment, wants independence, dad for controlling. I'd known he was manipulative. I hadn't realized how deliberate it was. Marcus whistled low. He builds the whole play before he even starts the game. We packed the contents into bankers' boxes and drove straight to the Albuquerque police station. The duty officer called in a detective who took one look at the files and asked for our chain of custody documentation. "This is identity theft prep," he said, "and interstate. That makes it federal." By the next morning, the boxes were in the custody of an FBI field office. I called Richard. "You just handed them a slam dunk," he said. "This isn't about fraud anymore. It's about conspiracy and identity theft across multiple states. The feds eat that for breakfast." Telling Kara was the hard part. I asked her to meet me in my office. Neutral ground, but private. When she arrived, I didn't start with accusations. I didn't even mention Ethan. I just set her file on the desk and slid it toward her. She hesitated before opening it. Then she began flipping through the pages. Her breath hitched at the photocopy of her passport. Her eyes lingered on the pressure points page. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. "A storage unit in New Mexico. Rented under an alias. The FBI has it now." She closed the folder slowly. "So, everything? The fights we had? The things he said about you? He was playing me?" "Yes." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "God, I feel so—" "Don't," I said gently. "He's been doing this for years. He's a professional at making good people feel stupid." She looked up at me then, and for the first time since this began, there was no fog in her expression, just clarity. "I want to testify," she said. Marcus was waiting outside when she left. I told him about her decision. "That's it then," he said. "Once she's on record, he's finished." "Not until he's in a cell," I replied. Because if I'd learned anything in 30 years of law, it was that a man like Ethan Blake doesn't go quietly, even when the bars are already closing. By the time the FBI took possession of Ethan's storage unit files, the case against him had grown teeth. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, witness tampering. It wasn't just a rap sheet. It was a career obituary. For the first time since my heart attack, I felt something close to optimism, which is exactly when Ethan reminded me who I was dealing with. Richard called me on a Monday morning with the update. The U.S. Attorney's Office is moving to consolidate the Colorado and New Mexico charges. They're also talking to Phoenix about the 2016 case. "That's good," I said. "It's good," Richard agreed. "But Caro, Ethan's attorney, is pushing for bail to remain in place until trial. They're arguing he's no flight risk." I laughed bitterly. "They have flight written into their business plan." Richard didn't laugh. He's also hinting that Ethan might resolve things amicably if certain witnesses withdraw. I knew what that meant. Ethan wasn't going to run anymore. He was going to reach. Marcus confirmed my fear 2 days later. "He's probing your daughter's perimeter," Marcus said over the phone. "Not directly. He's using intermediaries, friends, co-workers, anyone who'll listen." "What's the pitch?" "That you've overblown the whole thing. that the feds don't have much, and if she just refuses to testify, the case collapses. It was smart. Kara's cooperation was now the spine of the prosecution's timeline. Without her, the other victims still made a strong case, but she was the only one whose evidence intersected with the storage unit and the trust fraud. I decided to confront her before he got to her first. We met at her apartment, the first time I'd been invited in since this started. It smelled faintly of lavender and coffee, like the Kara I remembered. "I know he's trying to get to you," I said as soon as the door closed. Her eyes flickered. "People have been reaching out." "I'm not here to tell you what to do," I said. "I'm here to remind you that if you back out now, you're not just stepping away from your own case. You're leaving every other woman he's hurt to face him alone." She crossed her arms. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you're still in the middle of something you didn't choose, and I think he's counting on that." For a long moment, she just looked at me. Then she said, "I'm not backing out." It should have been a relief, but the part of me that had spent 3 decades in court knew better. Pressure doesn't just test people, it breaks them. And Ethan had one last card to play. The card came on a Thursday night. I was in my office, going over trial prep notes from the U.S. attorney, when my security system pinged. Motion detected. Front porch. I pulled up the live feed. Ethan Blake, standing in the wash of the porch light. Before I could process it, the doorbell rang. I didn't move to answer. Instead, I hit record on the camera audio. "Come on, Dan," he called. His voice was casual, but it carried an edge. "We should talk, man to man. We can end this tonight." I stayed silent. He stepped closer to the camera. "You've done your damage, but think about your daughter. Do you really want her dragged through a federal trial?" I reached for my phone, dialing Marcus. "He's here," I whispered. "I'm 5 minutes out," Marcus said. "Stay inside." Ethan leaned in until his face filled the frame. "You've got no idea what you've started, but you'll find out. Soon." Marcus pulled up just as Ethan stepped off the porch. Ethan didn't run. He just smiled, slid into the Audi, and drove away. The footage went straight to the U.S. Attorney's office the next morning. It was clear intimidation, not enough for a fresh arrest without a violation of bail terms, but enough to file a motion for stricter conditions. Kara came to my house the following night. "He was outside your place, wasn't he?" she said, no preamble. "Yes." She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she didn't drink. "I'm not scared of him anymore," she said finally. "But I hate that he's still in my head." "That's what the trial is for," I said. "It's not just about locking him up. It's about taking back your space." She nodded slowly. "Then, let's finish this." The pre-trial hearings were set for mid-September. Jury selection would follow within weeks. The U.S. Attorney wanted Kara's testimony to open the case, set the tone, make the pattern undeniable. Richard sent me the prep outline, direct examination, cross, exhibits. The pressure points page from the storage unit would be the keystone. The night before the first hearing, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid we'd lose, by then the evidence was overwhelming, but because I knew Ethan's kind. They fight hardest when the clock's almost run out. The next morning, walking into the courthouse, I caught sight of him across the marble lobby. No Audi now, just a suit, a smirk, and the same eyes that had studied me the first night we met. He didn't speak, just tapped 2 fingers to his temple, and then to me. A message. I'm still in here. I didn't break stride, because in less than a week, he'd be in a place where his mind games wouldn't reach anyone. And I'd be there to watch the cell door close, The morning of jury selection, downtown Denver felt like it was holding its breath. The courthouse sat against a pale sky, its glass facade catching the early light like a mirror no one wanted to look into. I'd been in that building more times than I could count in my career, but never like this. Never as a father with skin in the game and a daughter about to take the stand. Kara met me in the witness room before the proceedings. She was dressed simply, navy blouse, black slacks, hair pulled back. No jewelry except for a thin gold bracelet her mother used to wear. "You ready?" I asked. Her hands were clasped, but her voice was steady. "I'm done being scared of him." The prosecution's case unfolded like the blueprint we'd built. First, Amanda Price, laying out the whirlwind romance and the financial gutting that followed. Then Jennifer Cross, with nearly identical beats. Then Sarah Layton from Phoenix, tying the same playbook across state lines. By the time they called Kara, the jury already knew the shape of the predator they were looking at. She was there to give him a name. I sat behind the prosecution's table as she walked to the stand, feeling the air shift. Ethan watched her with the same expression he'd used to charm her in the beginning. Soft smile, head slightly tilted. "Ms. Barrett," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court how you met the defendant?" She told them, calm, measured, the coffee dates, the laughter, the sense of safety he built. And then, the slow corrosion, the suggestions about financial independence, the push to sell her condo, the framing of her father as a controlling figure. When they reached the pressure points page from the storage unit, Kara held it in her hands for a moment before speaking. "These are my fears, my insecurities," she said. "Things I told him when I thought he loved me. Seeing them written out like this, I realized he wasn't loving me. He was studying me." Ethan's smirk faltered. The cross-examination was surgical. Caro tried to plant seeds of doubt, suggesting the file could have been fabricated, that her father's legal connections made such fabrication easy. Kara didn't flinch. If my father wanted to control me, he wouldn't have spent months letting me make my own mistakes. He let me walk into this because he knew the only way out was to see it for myself. For the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale. The defense had little left. They called two character witnesses, an old co-worker and a cousin, both of whom buckled under cross when confronted with the storage unit evidence. When closing arguments came, the U.S. attorney didn't lean on emotion. She leaned on the pattern, the timeline, the hard paper evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about heartbreak," she told the jury. "This is about theft. This is about control. This is about a man who treats love as an entry point to someone else's assets." The jury deliberated for 6 hours, long enough for my chest to feel like it did in the hospital. Every beat a reminder of what was at stake. When they filed back in, I searched their faces, but saw nothing until the foreperson stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." The sentencing came a month later. 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole before 12. He'd be in his 50s before he saw daylight without bars. As the marshals led him away, Ethan looked back at me. No smile this time, just a flat, cold stare. I held his gaze until the door shut behind him. Kara and I walked out of the courthouse into the autumn air. The trees along the street were turning gold, leaves drifting down like a slow exhale. We stood there for a long moment before she spoke. "I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling stupid," she said. I shook my head. "Don't confuse being targeted with being foolish. He didn't pick you because you were weak. He picked you because you were worth the effort." Her eyes glistened. "You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." "That's what you do for family," I said. We drove back to my place in silence. Inside, I made coffee while she wandered into my office. She stopped in front of the photo of her, Claire, and me from her graduation. "She'd be proud of you," I said. Kara looked at the photo for a long moment. "I hope so. I feel like I finally came home today." Later, after she left, I sat alone in the quiet house. The war was over, but the echoes would linger. My own heartbeat reminding me of the night this started, the phone call that cut through the antiseptic hum of a hospital room. I thought about Claire's voice in my memory. "Protect her." "I did," I said to the empty room, "and I always will." Outside, the leaves kept falling, the world moving on, and for the first time in months, I let it.